Okay, welcome to Quick and Dirty again. Today, how does a camera work and what has to do it with our eye? The last video I was explaining how our eye works, and today I will explain the similarities to a camera. Again, like in the most of my videos, no graphics or anything, so basically you can shut your eyes, concentrate and listen. Okay, how does a camera work? The best thing is when I explain it with an old analog cameras back in the days, okay? What was the special thing of these old cameras, which is different to our new digital cameras? Well, they had a film, okay? And what was a film? A film basically contains or is light sensitive material. Okay, so what does that mean? You know that films must be developed in the Lightroom. And if you develop a film which was never exposed to the light, this light sensitive material couldn't react. So the picture which you develop from the film is black, okay? Totally black. And as you might remember from the last movie, we made this experiment with a blink of an eye, okay? How long does it take if you close your eyes and you open your eyelid? How long does it take for you to see something? And it was very short, right? And the same thing is with this film, okay? It takes a split second and this photosensitive material reacts to the light, which means everywhere light falls onto this sensitive material. When you develop this in the Lightroom, on this spot where the light was falling on, it gets brighter, which means it's not black anymore. And as you might also recall from the last video, we were talking about the green leaves. So we have brighter green leaves and we have darker green leaves, which means that different amounts of light is reflected by the leaves, which means that sometimes more and sometimes less light is falling on that sensitive material, which means some of the leaves will later look brighter and some of the leaves will later look darker on the picture. This is what's called exposing the film. Basically, you expose this light sensitive material to a light source or to indirect light, and then this black film gets exposed and gets brighter. So basically a film must be protected its whole life by the light, because it must stay dark, and then in the second where you want to make the picture, you expose the film to the light, and when you made the picture this film must be protected again for light or off light. And this is basically the reason why these films, they were in these plastic cases. You know, these film boxes. The film was in these plastic cases because there was no light. It was completely dark. So it was not exposed by the light in these plastic cases, right? Good. So how can you technically achieve this, that the film is not exposed to the light when it shouldn't be, but in the second when it should be exposed, and later it shouldn't be exposed anymore? It's wow. So basically you need a black box, okay? You need a black box which is totally dark inside, okay? And you can put the film inside, and you can pull the film out of this plastic box, because there is this protecting black box around it, so no light can come on the film, and it's still protected of the light. And then you need a hole in this black box, which is where the light can fall in, but this hole must be also closed by a shutter. And in the second where you want to make the picture, the shutter opens, lets the light fall in through the hole, falls on the film, exposes the film, and when it's finished, the shutter must close again, 100% light tight, that no light can fall through the hole again. And this is basically how you make a picture, and voila, you have a camera. Okay, you need some other element, which is a lens in front of this black, in front of the hole, that you can focus what you want to expose. But basically a camera is a black box with a lens and a shutter to expose the film. And as I told you, I want to explain you the similarities to our eye. So basically the eyelid is the same thing, but the shutter is at a camera. You close the eye, you close the shutter, no light can come in, you don't see anything, no picture. If you open the eyelid and if you open the shutter, light can fall in, you see something. The only difference is that right now I have my eye open and it's not getting brighter, okay? It is like always this constant brightness, this constant lightness level. A camera is different. The longer you open the shutter, the longer light can fall in, and this photosensitive material of the film is reacting. With every millisecond, light falls on, it gets brighter and brighter and brighter. So it adds up the light, okay? The more light falls in and the longer it falls in, the brighter the material gets later in the Lightroom. So this time, how long you expose the film to the light is called exposure time, or the time how long the shutter is open is called shutter speed. Okay, you have a shutter speed from 1 second, it's open for 1 second and then it closes again. So here's an example. If you are not watching right now, you can open your eyes. If you have a relatively short exposure time, or you can also say if you have a very fast shutter speed, the picture is darker because the camera has not so much time to collect the light. In this example, I have a shutter speed of 100th part of a second. Okay, this is, let's say, relatively short. Okay, if I choose now a way longer exposure time, for example, only 1/10th of a second, which is 10 times longer, which means the shutter speed is way slower, the picture gets much brighter because the camera has more time to collect the light. So you may ask now, okay, but how long can I expose my film to the sunlight? You may have seen in a movie or whatever the scene where a paparazzo takes a picture of a celebrity, right? And the celebrity doesn't want that there is a picture of him. So back in the days, in the analog days, the celebrity was running to the paparazzo and taking the camera, and he was opening the camera, and he took this plastic case with a film and he stretched it out. He was pulling the film out of the plastic box. Why? Well, because if sunlight falls on the whole film, it gets overexposed. Too much light, and this is very fast. So it takes like the bright sunlight, it takes like 1 second, and it's totally overexposed, which means from the formerly black picture, it becomes totally white. Okay, so this was a reason why they didn't even have to take away the film. They just pull it out, overexpose it to the sunlight, and all the pictures were white. But it was not so bright, maybe 2 seconds, but basically the photographer knew the pictures are gone. Today, in the digital world, the celebrity must run to the photographer, take the camera, go into the menu. Okay, where can I delete the pictures? It takes forever. Okay, so, and this is also not a good idea because deleting the pictures, you can recover them. So you should, I didn't say what you should do, but this is the reason why celebrities take sometimes the complete SD card, that they have the data. Okay. Then we have this black thing in the middle of our eye, which we also already covered a little bit, which is called a pupil. And a camera has the same thing. The camera, it's called aperture. You may already have seen this crazy mechanical device which has this crazy form which can close and open. You basically, I think you know what I mean. And do you know when you come from a bright room in your house and a dark room in your house, it takes some seconds and then your eyes adjust to this lower brightness level. And what happens in this adjusting time? Well, basically, your pupil gets bigger, okay? The pupil is nothing else than you have the iris, this rainbow skin, which makes the color of the eye. Nice blue. This iris, how big this iris is, controls the size of this black hole in the middle, which is called the pupil. And when you go into a dark room, this pupil gets bigger. Why does it get bigger? That more light can fall into your eyes, of course. So the bigger this black hole is, the more light falls in, the brighter you perceive your surrounding. And a camera, as I already told, has the same. It's called aperture there. And now it gets a little bit tricky, okay? So, concentration. Okay. Aperture is measured in numbers. These are called Fstops. And these numbers go from, for example, let's make it easy, f2 to, let's say, f20. Very basic. And here is where it gets a little bit confusing, because I still have problems with getting this all together, and I always have to think about this because it's a little bit crazy from the wording. If you have a big hole in the middle, the black hole is big, which means the aperture is very open, okay? This is called a large aperture, but it has a small f-stop number, for example, 2. And if you have a small hole in the middle, it's a very closed aperture. It's a small aperture, and it has a big f-stop number. So this confuses me every time, and actually I had to come up with a jingle with a, wait, I have to look up the word. Mnemonic. With a mnemonic. It's called mnemonic or a memory hook. Okay, so how can you memorize this? Well, you only need to remember one word, and this is, I have to go there because there are the dogs. Woo. An aperture is basically blocking the light. Okay, you only need to remember the word blocking. Okay, which means the bigger, or let's start with small. The smaller the aperture is, the bigger is the blocking effect, okay? The bigger is the amount of light which is blocked out of the camera, so the number is bigger, okay? And if you have an open aperture with a huge hole, the blocking effect is very small, very small. So you have a small f-stop number like 2. This is basically how I remember it, okay? Big amount of blocking, big f-stop number, small amount of blocking, small f-stop. And in the future, in my future tutorials, if I say big, small or whatever, I will not use the word close or wide or whatever. I only use big and small. I'm always talking about the number. Why am I talking about the number? Because when I adjust the aperture in the camera, I see the value of the number. Okay? I don't see if this hole is big and I need a small number or whether it's small. This is all confusing. I see the number on the display, okay? So I always talk about the number and not is the hole big or is the hole small, okay? I have an example. If you don't watching, you can open your eyes now. If I take an aperture with a big number, like for example 11, means that the blocking device has a strong effect. There is lots of blocking because I have a big number, which means the picture is way darker because more light is kept out of the camera because the aperture is very close. The hole is very small. If I use a very small aperture number, means that the effect of this blocking device called aperture is very small, which means not much light gets blocked out of the camera, which means the picture is way brighter because the hole in the aperture is much bigger, much light can fall in. Cool. Let's come to the last part, which is the retina in our eyes. And this is basically what I'm talking the whole time about the camera thing. This is what the film is in the camera, in the analog camera. Nowadays, in the digital times, you don't have an analog film anymore, you have a digital sensor, okay? So the sensor in digital times is the same thing like the film. In analog times is the same thing like the retina in our eyes. And as the retina in our eyes has these light sensitive cells, these photoreceptors, and actually in digital times you can compare the eye much better with a digital sensor than with a film, because can you remember when I told you about these photosensitive cells on your retina? Well, actually this is the same like the megapixels of a sensor. Megapixels, or the pixels, because mega is only a number, how much pixels? The pixels of a sensor are like small compartments, okay? The sensor has a size, and this is split into lots of compartments. And each compartment on the sensor is like one of these photosensitive cells on your retina and collects all the rays in the size and collects the information of the light rays which fall on this compartment. Hue, saturation and lightness. And I was also talking about the light sensitivity of our retina. From the human, it's not so good in comparison to cats or owls, but it's still good in comparison to film and digital sensors. And the light sensitivity of our eyes or from animals, it's fixed, okay? It's fixed. But with analog films, you can change them. Of course, each film has a specific sensitivity, but you can buy films in different sensitivities. And this is called ISO. You can buy a film with a low light sensitivity, which has an ISO of 100, for example. And you can buy a film with a much higher light sensitivity, for example, with an ISO value of 800, which means this film needs much less light to be exposed properly, which means you can make pictures in the dark, or not really in the dark, but when the light is already gone, when the sun went, and you have a film with a high light sensitivity, you can make pictures because this film doesn't need so much light anymore. So you may now say, well, okay, why don't I take every time a film with a high light sensitivity, so I always have super bright, good pictures? Well, there is a downside. And the downside is that films with a high ISO number, they produce lots of noise, okay? The pictures don't look very clean. Basically, the quality gets worse. So if you are making pictures in the bright sunlight, you should go with a very low ISO to just keep that noise down. But I will cover this in a second, a little bit more specific, when we come to digital sensors, which is right now. So a digital sensor also has one specific light sensitivity, but you can also change the ISO values of a camera, which doesn't really change the sensitivity. It's more you tell the camera how the sensor shall interpret the signals, the light signals that it gets. This is a little bit hard to grasp, so I try to explain it. Imagine you have a black vacuum, okay? It's a room, it's totally black in there, and it's a vacuum, okay? Which means there is no air in it, it's totally empty. If you send now a ray of light through that room, guess what happens? You cannot see this light beam. Why can't you see the light beam? Because light needs a surface on which it can be reflected, okay? You see if you look directly into the light source, but if you have a beam and you see it in the profile, you cannot see it in a dark vacuum. This is also the reason why the universe is black, because actually there is plenty of light in the universe. Lots of light. I mean, the sun emits so much light and sends it through the universe. But why is it black? Well, because there are so few particles in the universe, it's not empty. But there are so few atoms in the universe where the light can be reflected on the surface that it's practically it's black, okay? And I have another good example for the nerds. Do you know the bat signal? And it's funny that right now there's a Spider-Man guy in the park. So the bat signal, there is this beam, this light beam from Gordon, and if he is calling Batman, he has this light source with the symbol of Batman, and he puts this super strong ray into the sky. Guess what? If there is a cloudless sky in that night, you wouldn't see the Batnik. You wouldn't see the bat signal, which means you always need a cloud or a layer of dust or anything, any surface where the light can be projected on. You may already have seen a laser show at a discotheque or whatever. They use this water vapor or whatever that they create artificial clouds where the laser must go through, because you can see the laser beam much better when it has to go through this vapor dust. But this is also the reason why you can hardly see this beam, and you can see the bat signal much stronger, because the beam just there are no clouds. Okay. You may see it when the city, for example, like Gotham City, if it's very polluted, very much dust in the air, you could see the beam. Okay. Lots of pictures here today in the park. Okay, so let's imagine a very dark night, okay? And that's funny. And I'm not talking about the Batman, because the Batman is the Dark Knight. That was good. Okay. So imagine a dark night where you are on the street, okay? It's very dark, basically, you cannot see anything. And you take out your camera and you have you dial in the ISO 100, okay? And guess what? The camera can also don't see anything because it's dark. So if you dial now the ISO number up to, let's say, as high as your camera can go, what happens? In comparison to the first example where it was a vacuum, a black room with nothing in there, on the street there is no vacuum, okay? There is air, and there is pollution, and there is dust and everything. Which means that the rest of light, because basically it's never 100% dark out there. It's never pitch black. You always have a little bit of light. And this little bit of light is reflected and on all the particles which are in the air, on all the atoms, on everything. Okay? And if you crank up the ISO number of the camera sees all these little light reflections, and it interprets it as light, but basically it's just noise, because you don't want to make picture of all these particles, but every of these particles in the air reflects the light a little bit different, a little bit stronger, a little bit weaker, another spectrum of the light. One is a little bit bluer, one is a little bit greener. Of course, you cannot see anything of this because your eyes are just way too weak. But the camera captures it, and this is the noise which you see. This is just because all the pixels on the sensor, they just see totally different light sources. Okay, this is what I was saying. The higher is the ISO, the more noise comes into the picture. Okay, so if you have the same situation and you make two pictures, one time with an ISO number of 100 and one times with an ISO number of 800, the picture with the 800 is much brighter because the light is interpreted as much brighter or the film with an ISO number of 800 was way more light sensitive and just captured more light in the same time, in the same shutter, in the same exposing time where your shutter was open. Here's an additional information for the light sensitivity. The number of pixels your sensor has nothing to do with the light sensitivity, okay? The more your camera is light sensitive, the better your sensor is, the higher the quality of your pictures. The number of megapixel has nothing to do with this. The number of megapixel only says how many compartments you have, which means the information from all the light beams which are coming in, they can be separated in smaller fractions, which basically means more details, okay? And we were talking about these photoreceptor light-sensitive cells on your retina. I have no numbers right now, but I'm sure the human eye has way more cells than a sensor, a camera has megapixels, because you can see details, you can see so many different leaves on the trees. Basically, you can see, I don't know, millions of different leaves, and the camera cannot see this. You can zoom in, but you will not see so many leaves because there are not enough megapixels. And you may ask now, yeah, wait, how many megapixel does a film, an analog film have? Well, also there I have no number, but if you compare an analog film with a digital sensor, a film also has way more megapixel, okay? And this became totally clear when I once was in the Madison Square Garden in New York City. I saw a picture, a huge poster from a boxer. And it was, I think it was a black and white picture from, I don't know, from the 30s or from the 20s. So very old, so 90 years old. And I was looking at this poster and I thought, wow, this is so sharp. I see so many details on the skin of the boxer and everything. And then I thought, like, how could they do such a super detailed picture 100 years ago? And this was actually the answer, because they had analog films. And the restriction, how much details you could photograph, you could make with a film, is basically the physical structure of the film, the surface, the material of the film. If you zoom in with a magnifying glass, how does this photosensitive material looks? Okay, and the sharpness of a picture has something to do with the focus. Okay, how focused is your picture? But let's assume you have a totally perfect nailed focus, which makes the picture sharp. The amount of details is all about the number of megapixel, or how qualitatively good your film is. So theoretically, you have the chance to buy different films with different ISO, but the problem is you cannot really change them. For those who don't know, the standard size of a film was either 12 pictures, I think 12, 24 or 36. And when you bought it, before you plugged it into your camera, you had to decide, do I take a film with ISO 800 or ISO 100 or whatever? And this was basically not a problem if you say, okay, I have a film with 36 pictures and I have a party this night, it's dark, whatever. Then it was easy to make the decision, okay, I take the ISO 800 film and it was good to go. Or you were shooting a wedding outside and it was bright sunlight the whole day. You can easily take a film with an ISO 100. But when you have like an occasional camera which lays in your cupboard for half a year, and you make one picture there and 2 weeks later you make another picture there, you have totally varying light situations. So then back in the days you were taking like a compromise film with an ISO number of 200 or 400 because you couldn't really change the film. Why? Yeah, because you can remember there is this black box and you don't want to open this black box while the film is out of this protecting plastic case. Because when you open the camera, light falls on the film, okay? And then it exposes your film, what you don't want. And a film was $2, $3, $4, $5, depending on the quality and the amount of pictures you could make. Yeah, so this was a decision you had to do. Nowadays, you just change the ISO number in the digital camera. And when you have exposed one scene, one picture, there was like a mechanism, like way back in the days, you had like this crank or this winder where you had to transport the film manually to a not exposed part. But later the camera made this automatically. So the spot where the light was falling on the film, it was like this rectangle which was exposed, and then it has to be transported a little further to a non-exposed part of the film to take the next exposure. And of course you have already seen these parts of the films. And why have you seen this? Well, when they came out of the Lightroom. So after the development, you can totally look in the sunlight at these negatives, because then nothing can happen anymore. So let's recap. What did I say in the last videos? Basically one thing: the more light, the brighter is what you see, what your eyes see, or the brighter the picture will be what your camera takes. Okay. You may say now, hey, wait, Mike, wait. So you said the longer the exposure time, or you can also say the slower the shutter speed, the brighter the picture. Yes. And you said the bigger this black hole in the aperture is, the more light is collected in the camera. Yes. And you said the higher the light sensitivity of your film is, the higher the ISO number is, the more light is captured in the same time. Yes. Okay. So when all these three things, the shutter speed, the aperture, and the ISO number, control the brightness of a picture, which is called the exposure, then is there a specific order in which I should adjust them manually? And why should I do this? Because my camera can do this automatically. These two questions I will answer in the next video. Whew, this was a lot today. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.